My PC will crash if I try Blender. No Blender required. Welcome everyone to our next video. We will be doing Blender Donuts, which means that we will be taking this render from our editor Pbay, following a Blender tutorial, but we're not using Blender. I'm going to teach you guys how to make Blender Donuts in Photoshop. Could be CSP, Procreate, the same fundamentals. We'll cover everything. We're not going to jump straight into the donut because it might be a bit too complicated. We're going to start off with the classic, the ball. So as you can see here, I have 6 balls of 3 different colors in 2 different lighting scenarios. 2 times 3 is 6. And I'm going to make one of these from scratch for you guys, so you can see in real time how it works. Maybe the video will be sped up and you won't be able to see real time, so maybe we can put like a little timer in the corner. We're going to start off with the local color of the ball, is what the inherent color is of this ball. So typically you see the blue, yellow, red kind of examples. Let's try something different and we'll go with orange. It's a very bright orange, beautiful. And what we're going to start off with is our lighting direction. So let us imagine that we have the sun pointing from the corner. So it's coming kind of diagonally at a 45-degree angle from the sky. The next step will be to cast a shadow. So I'm going to copy the ball because it's a circle already. If it was just a shadow, it would be black. But we actually do have light aside from our sun. And that light is from the sky, which creates our ambient light. And so our ambient light would be affecting the shadow a little bit. The further away a shadow is from an object, the more diffuse it'll be, the more spread out it will become. So the shadow will be nice and sharp down here. It will be kind of blurry up here. And then we'll also have ambient occlusion, which is where the light is occluded, even the ambient light. So very dark shadow down there. Okay, so our shadow's done. Let's work on the ball. So there's our light direction. Just going to do like a black, soft, kind of circular shape. The light is kind of hitting it in the middle here. Everything around it will be black. The first light source we're going to consider is the direct light, which is the sun. So the sun is casting like yellowy light onto the ball. We're going to try to keep some of the local color of the orange. We're just trying to imagine what color it would turn into if it was affected by a bit of yellow sunlight. Aside from the key light, we have other lights that are affecting it. So the ambient light is not as strong as the key light, and so it only affects the shadow portion of the ball. Even though there's like blue skylight coming down on the whole ball, we're not just going to see it like this. It wouldn't make any sense. It only affects the parts that are in shadow because the sunlight is so strong that it overtakes any of the ambient light that you might see from the sky. When the moon is illuminated by the sun, there's like no atmosphere in order to cast ambient light into the shadow areas. And so your shadow areas end up being pretty much pitch black. The next step will be to consider another source of light, the bounce light. So we basically have the sunlight coming from here. It's going do 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 do, and it's bouncing off of this ground surface and into this area. And the ground is somewhat reflective, it reflects the light up. So obviously depending on what the material is, you'll get stronger bounce light. And we're just going to do a generic kind of amount of bounce light on this, a yellowy kind of light. I think our sunlight, I'm going to make it a little bit more yellow so there's a bit more contrast. So ambient occlusion, like I described before, is the area in which light has a hard time reaching. If you have a ball and it's like this, and then you have the surface that the ball is sitting on, and then you have the bounce light coming in and it will bounce around. The more times it bounces, the weaker the rays get until light can basically not reach this area at all. So you will get a soft gradation out from these like little crevices of like pitch blackness. So that's what's happening in here. Okay, there we go. And then last but not least is something very special called Specular Highlight. Depending on the material, a specular highlight can basically be a reflection. A mirror will reflect the specular highlight as a perfect reflection, all the way down to a soft diffused specular, like maybe on an orange, for example. It depends, like on a material like this, a specular is like a long highlight because it's cylindrical. You can see on the top here, you get like little spots of highlights on this plastic bit. This object is a generic ball. We'll just give it a generic amount of reflectiveness. Yeah, a bold head. A bold head is quite reflective actually. So time's up. How long did that take for me to do? Less than 10 minutes. And I was doing a demo explaining it to you all. The point is the fundamentals are not that complicated, and that when you kind of encounter complexity in your own artworks, try to reduce them down to these simple concepts. Local color, shadow, key light, ambient light, bounce light, ambient occlusion, specular highlight. 7 layers. That's all it is. So now that we have these fundamentals, we're going to try to apply this to our Blender Donuts. We're going to start off with our kind of granite table. I don't really know what it is. We're going to put kind of a warm-ish color to it, something like that. And then we have a bit of that ambient light from the sky. That's a nice, like, kind of subtle bluish color. Let's start off now with our plate and donuts. I'm going to leave the mug for the end if we have a bit of time. I'm just going to use the elliptical marquee tool because it will make a perfect ellipse for me. I'm assuming that this is maybe a slightly off-white, kind of natural white plate, like that. The donut is also elliptical, but it's kind of like an extruded ellipse. I'm going to put in like the bread or the dough kind of color to start off with, some kind of a yellow orange-ish. I'll just duplicate the ellipse and drag it down, and then we'll just include some of these sides here. And I'm going to put it in a folder called donut, just for organization. Maybe we'll just go one thing at a time, and we'll just focus on the donut for now. I'm going to press this lock transparency thing for the donut. Means that I can paint within the donut shape without painting outside the lines. So we're going to pick a pink color to be our local color for this pink icing. And I'm going to draw out the way that the icing is dripping. It'll inform the form and dimensionality of the icing, which will help us depict it through lighting cues. Okay, so I think that's the rough shape. I forgot this is a donut. So there's a hole in it, kind of like a little triangle. I'll clean up some of the shape of this donut as well, because as you can see, it comes out. It is a layer on top of the donut. I notice as well, it has like little craggly bits. So it's not a perfectly smooth donut because that would be impossible. So because I've painted in the shape of the icing and the donut, we can kind of make selections. We'll call this like the letter I shadow. You can press this button, this little like rectangle with a hole in it. It just masks it. Just like before, it locks transparency in its own way. So I'll do the same for the donut. And there we have it. I think I'm going to make this local color, kind of more saturated and darker, or a more kind of richer feeling color. Just like before, we'll just start off with the shadow using a soft brush. So just like this. I haven't established the light direction yet, but looking at this image, we can kind of see how the shadow is being cast in this direction, which means that our sunlight is probably like coming in a direction that's almost sideways, but maybe a bit from the back. So maybe it's more like that. There is a secondary light, like an artificial light source, which is casting this shadow that you can see here, and even the shadow that you can see here of the mug, a shadow in a different direction. We're only seeing this part of the shadow in the shadow, if that makes sense, because our key light is too strong and just overtakes any kind of shadow that you might be able to see in this area. You can also see it here as well. This line here shows the shadow that's being cast by our artificial light, but it's much weaker and it doesn't really have a color. You can imagine it just like a light bulb or something. And then last but not least, there's also the ambient light from what looks like the sky, because we have a bit of blue kind of ambient light hitting all of the shadow areas. So now that we have that established, we'll continue with painting our shadow here, just using a soft round brush to paint in our shadow. So maybe just the slightest of kind of shadow like this that looks like it's being cast from the icing. Then we'll do the shadow of the icing. So we can see here it's like kind of a round shape. It's a bit like blobby. It's like this. And then as it kind of wraps around, it kind of drops off as we're coming around because it's a cylinder shape. And so there'll be a gradual drop off of that shadow. There is also shadow in this part because the donut is a torus. And so this part is kind of facing away from the light. And then as you can see, because there is volume, we're seeing kind of this shadow around the edges. It's not just like flat, there is a thickness to it. We can see here from the reference image that there's like a splotchiness in the shadow, and that's because there's different thicknesses throughout the different parts of the icing, and so there's undulations. So if you add kind of bits where the shadow kind of gets darker, that helps to show it's a little lumpy. I'm also melting, just like our icing. I'm going to clean up the shadow here because the face of the donut is like coming around here. And so this part is kind of hitting the light. And so our shadow doesn't stretch around that far. Okay, so now we have like this weird early 90s looking render of a donut. Microsoft donut. Ancient donuts clip art. Let's continue onward with the key lights. Because of the sunlight, it would warm up our pink color. So we're going to move towards a warm direction, like towards the yellows, and it would be kind of like brighter like that. If you control click this part of the layer, it makes a selection. And then what we can do is use the selection to erase. We can make sure our key light is not leaking into our shadow. Alternatively, I guess you could also just put the shadow over the top. Depends on what you want to do. So we're going to do the same thing for the donuts part of the donut. Very nice. You can also control click a mask to get that selection. There's also ambient light coming from our artificial light. I'm not really seeing what kind of color it is. It's like obviously weaker than the key light. Maybe it's a bit warm. The ambient light itself also follows the same rules as the key light. And so there's like parts of the icing that are shadowed even from the ambient light. As you can see, like especially that little corner there where it looks like it's folding around the thickness of it. So we're just going to take that and make it a bit more of a darker, more saturated tone. And you'll notice if we do it like kind of around the edges of this, you'll end up with a volume to the icing. And maybe along the top here, we start to see some of the blueness from the ambient sky. Obviously, there's also this part of the shadow that ambient light is affecting. The more detailed you are with these things, the more realistic your donut will look and more high fidelity it will be. Now we'll do the ambient light of the donut just like before. It'll make the color here kind of lighter but also warmer at the same time. So the bounce light here is really interesting. There's lots of sources of bounce. So we'll start off with our icing. iBounce sounds like an Apple product. So we're getting like some bounce light here. It's almost like a reflection, probably coming from the plate. So we don't see any intense pink here because there's nothing to like reflect the pink against each other. But in here, there's like pink everywhere. So the sun's coming in here, reflecting pink here, 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 here. So you get like these kind of intense pinkness in the shadows here. And it kind of like falls off a little bit and gets a little more desaturated. You know, a donut is obviously a lot more complicated than a ball, but observation coupled with a little bit of knowledge of fundamentals should carry you through a large part of the way. There's a bit of coolness in here. It almost turns our pink like a bit more purplish. So we'll make sure to get that in there as well. Looks like it's kind of reflecting the plate, getting this kind of more intense, almost specular looking kind of highlight. But I wouldn't call this a specular. I'd still think it's bounce light. At some point, a lot of the lighting sources kind of merge in with each other. Because this donut is kind of folding down, this bottom part is actually reflecting that plate kind of color. The bounce light for the donut, it's not really bouncing much light. The donut is like a rough material. And so it's not reflecting much, and so the bounce light is actually not really affecting it very much at all. And you can see also there's no specular highlight on it. I will still get a bit of warmth into the shadow area though, and a little bit of brightness as well. So ambient occlusion in this one will probably affect mostly kind of like this inside of the donut. You can imagine it's a hole, so less light is getting into the hole. And then also this underside of this donut. I'm not really seeing much of it in this render, but you know, including it should only help to kind of increase the realisticness. Because the donut is rounded, the visible underside is picking up bounce light from the plate, whereas the part touching the plate that would have ambient occlusion is actually not visible from this angle. We're only going to be considering the specular on the icing. You just have to follow the reference for this one. It's kind of hard to figure out. It's not like a ball where you just like make a point, you know? I'm just using the soft round brush, by the way, and that's basically all I've been using for this entire exercise. And then there's like a specular in the shadow, which is quite interesting. It's more of this like dull, cooler tone. So I'm going to try to kind of increase the saturation a little bit. How impressive is this? We created a really realistic donut. For those of you watching this video that maybe have never done this before, do follow along, try this yourself, and you'll shock yourself at how easy it is to make something look really realistic and volumetric and lifelike. Because I'm gonna be honest, like, if you can do this, you're in a really good place. If you want to become a professional, or if you want to just create like really banging illustrations to post online, you like to make fan art. If you have this knowledge and these fundamentals, you can paint a donut like this, you're well on your way. This is like most of the knowledge and skill that you will need. Okay, we're gonna do the sprinkles now. All right, red sprinkle. Dude, there's so many sprinkles. This is annoying. Was this easy to do in Blender? I bet you just like did some simulation and then all the sprinkles fell onto the donut and it looked amazing. Meanwhile, I have to draw every sprinkle. I mean, it kind of looks like little maggots. I have maggots in my brain. Anyway, I'm just going to start off with the shadow. Obviously, there's differing amounts of shadow on each of these sprinkles. It depends on where they are and what other things surrounding it. I'm going to use a layer to add bounce light, but obviously, if we add like this warm kind of bounce to everything, it's not going to be all the same color. For example, for this red, I might want to use a color that looks a bit like this, but obviously I can't use that on the white part. Before, when we were painting different layers of shadow and light, we were just like picking the color, which I actually recommend you all do. Don't use blending modes, just pick the color that you think fits. Once you've learned how to do that, then we're going to level up and we're going to try to use some of those blending modes. So we're just going to get a color that will apply to everything and set it to screen. I think screen should work. And then when we put it here, it works as well. So we're just going to use this to kind of add that soft warmth here and there where we need it. Okay, so the speculars will just be white. It's like a cylinder, so it has the profile of a circle on the end. So it doesn't really matter what I do as long as the highlights make the shapes look cylindrical. Silly ducky. Toasty makes an appearance.
So cute!
Oh, what's she looking at? We're gonna have to do the shadow that's being cast. If you miss these things, it can look like everything is floating. The shadow is actually being cast here along the surface. I think this is an important detail. I'm just gonna do like a color balance to kind of warm it all up at the same time so that it fits the lighting a bit more. Something that I like to do is like set up the lighting for a material and just have it as like this smooth kind of gradient. But then once you have that ready to go, you can actually paint over it and got a nice lumpy looking donut. I'm not gonna lie, I think we cooked. I'm gonna incorporate the lighting into the shadow straight away. Instead of doing like the black shadow and then adding the ambient lighting and then adding the bounce light, hopefully that'll save me a bit of time. And then I'll adjust the plate color just right away. We'll just jump right in and we'll apply the apparent color. There is also a line of shadow that comes from the other cast shadow, but I think we should not include it because it is a little confusing to look at. Following the reference too closely can lead to ambiguity, which is not good. Illustration is all about communication, so sometimes it's good just to leave some stuff out. Now we have a nice little speckled plate. Just adjusting using color balance. I'm just gonna look for like a stone table texture. We're just gonna warp it in perspective. I guess it's kind of like photo bashing. We're just adjusting the colors a little bit. We'll just repaint our shadows. We'll set it to multiply and then we'll use like a cool-ish shadow tone. We're gonna do a subsurface scattering pass. It is when there is light bouncing through a material. If I put a flashlight behind my ear, the light is bouncing in and out and then radiating out. So it creates an intense saturation. You might see it on like a grape or like a leaf. If I do it through my hand, you'll see nothing. But as soon as I move it towards my fingers, you start to see it glow. That's because the edges of my fingers is where it's like thinner and light can more easily pass through. So a similar thing will happen with the donut. You'll get like some real intense saturation like that. You're kind of seeing it especially in here, I feel. You're gonna draw the cup too? No. There's nothing interesting about it. It's all the same stuff. Next thing you guys are gonna tell me like, you have to put the sprinkles. You have to put the sprinkles onto the plate. Yeah. That's it, guys. That's my Blender donut in Photoshop. So I guess I'll leave a link to the reference image. You're welcome to follow along and make a Blender donut without Blender and use your application of choice. Even do it traditionally if you want. And post it in our Discord. Join us and show me your donuts. Hi friends, thank you for reaching the end of this video. Hope it was helpful and thanks for all the feedback on the last video. We now have a Patreon, so sign up for free supplementary posts to accompany each video and more. Please leave your feedback in the comments below and let me know what you'd like to see in the future. See you next time. What a terrible tutorial. Who would put sprinkles on a donut? Just know, whenever you see sprinkles in an illustration, an artist painstakingly drew every single sprinkle like this. Lol. Who you laughing at? You don't know 3D either. You're in the same boat as me. We all sink together. Perfect French. Pièce de résistance. I was kind of killing it, but I choked at the end. I thought I was like missing everything, but apparently I was getting it. Okay, and then they have this bit at the end where it's like this giant... I'm gonna pause it here because I swear I get it. It says miss. Come on! Bring out the VAR chat. Bring out the VAR.